this computer. All right, you've been warned.
No.
All right, weekly study. We are on chapter 3. You see, we're kind of in that same light blue section. We're doing the second group of churches, the other three, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So we're going to cover those. Next week, we'll see. I'm going to do a little more research, but we might actually combine chapters 4 and 5. They look relatively short, and it's a lot of visionary stuff. So we'll look at that next week. Just a reminder, what happened to the ancient cities? How many of them are still standing? Which ones are thriving today? The three we covered today, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, all ruins, an archaeological site, ruins, an archaeological site. And one of them, there's a town in the place, but it's really not the same as the ancient city. So 2,000 years have passed and quite a few changes. These are the final three letters that we're going to cover. A brief overview of each one. Sardis, their accusation is they're a church in name only, no results, and there's no spirit at work. They're considered a dead church. So we're going to learn about them tonight and find out what Jesus's criticism and counsel is. Philadelphia, this is the one that everybody wants to be in because it's the only church that is a favored church. There's no criticisms leveled at this church in this letter. And the final one, Laodicea, self-indulgent and rich, ostentatious, and full of worldly pride, but they have this reputation of being lukewarm. And if you'll remember, we're going to hear that phrase, I spit you out of my mouth. So a brief overview of the different cities. Sardis, not mentioned otherwise in scripture. So we get the first introduction. Here it is in the last book of the Bible. We're hearing about a place called Sardis. It was wealthy, a capital area for in that area. And it's strategically located. This picture here does show the actual mountain that it was located on, and you can see some of the ruins in the foreground. This was a place that was geologically superior. It was a place that, boy, you were fortified. Your enemies had an impossible time of getting up that mountain, of not only getting up the mountain, but then getting past your guard gates. But what happened is twice in its history, once before Jesus and once after Jesus, the town was kind of lackadaisical. So they were conquered out of negligence. They literally left the gates unguarded because they're like, nobody can make it up this hill. We don't have to worry about guarding the gates. So they were kind of they were lax and allowed a conquering entity to come in twice. And there's a good story about how they were merely observing the occupying soldiers, and one of the guys' hats fell off, rolled down the mountain, and they watched him run down, pick it up, and then take a trail back. And they were like, "Oh, he just exposed the trail on how to get up that mountainside." So this was an area that Jesus is aware of, and he's going to mention it in his letter about the fact of, just because you think you're safe, don't go being lazy. So they're going to be rebuked, and his commandment is to wake up. Philadelphia, city of brotherly love we have in the United States. It doesn't exist anymore in Turkey. Not all, also not mentioned in Scripture. This gateway to the east was really a place prone to earthquakes. A lot of quakes in that section,
Like,
and
are
we're
those
going to
the
hear
ruins right there?
that is an actual picture of the city that is under archaeological dig. And we're going to hear that they're commanded to endure and hold fast. So even though they're not condemned for any reason, he pretty much says, thank you for keeping my, word and not denying my name, but hold fast, meaning that you're always going to be pursued. So up until now, things are going good, but you're still going to have to hold fast because things are going to happen in your future. Last church, Laodicea. It's mentioned in a couple of Paul's letters, both two places in Colossians. It was a banking center. And what's unique about this place is the only water that came into the city came through hot springs that were delivered via an aqueduct. And as a result, when the water finally made it to the city, it was kind of lukewarm. And Jesus takes advantage of that and uses it as a metaphor in his story and talks about them being lukewarm. Not only is their water lukewarm, but their whole attitude is lukewarm. They were famous for this medical eye salve, and you're going to hear Jesus talk about that. Um, he's going to uh, criticize them and tell them they need to be zealous and open the door. And you see in the upper right hand corner, I got a little picture of the old crossed palms of In-N-Out Burger. You're going to find out that In-N-Out, when you buy a pack of fries and look on the bottom of that uh, pack of French fries, you're going to see a quote from this section of Revelation.
Really?
Yeah, there's a
I
couple
did
of
not know that.
they put them on the burger wrapper and on the French fries. I know the French fry one is this, knock and open. I shall open the door and dine with you.
Huh.
When we finish our study of churches tonight, I mentioned before that one of the things we want to keep track of is there are some that interpret these stories. Why pick Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, and the others? Was it just a trail in the eastern part of Middle East, of the Asia Minor, or was it really representative of the church over the last two millennia? So you have this idea that, boy, that first century from 31, when they were probably just founded by, the actual apostles for the first 100 years, they had their first love. They were so excited. They'd actually met, apostles, if not Jesus himself, and the church was just booming. And then it went through phases. In the first 100 to 300 years, uh, they were doing lots of works. They were spreading the gospel and they were getting everything going and, starting up the church. And then Pergamos and then Thyatira. And you get to places like Philadelphia. This is the 1790s to the 1840s. The church, the Christian church, the 2,000-year-old church, at that stage in its life was fantastic. It was preachers from all over the world. It was uh, spreading the gospel in new continents. And, like I said, the entire country of America was founded on religious freedom and specifically by Christians who came here seeking asylum from the Church of England and, no state determined churches. And some of the best preachers in the world, Jonathan Edwards existed. So you have that stage in the life of the church. And then there are those who interpret the book of Revelation now to describe Laodicea and that church as what's been happening to the church across the globe in the last, 150, 200 years. And that's, lukewarm, spiritually poor, blind and naked. We're not going to get any compliments, and we're not really doing the job that the church was founded on. So there's people who interpret Revelation to not be just about churches that existed 2,000 years ago, but a progression of churches that start off just like your Christian friends. Boy, they start off like a ball of fire, and then suddenly they start complaining, and then suddenly they get cool, and that kind of stuff happens. So there's kind of a test you can take and find out which church am I? And you could say that about yourself. You could say that about the church you attend. And you can, in fact, say that about your entire nation. You can ask questions like, how am I at maintaining strong faith despite external pressure? That was the lesson we got from studying Ephesus. Are we facing persecution and still remaining steadfast? And that persecution you could think of as like, oh, that's in Northern Korea, that's the kind of persecution. Or is it persecution that, oh, you're a Christian, you're anti this and anti that, and therefore, we're against you. So it could be that type of persecution, and we have to remain steadfast. Do you, or does your physical body church, or does the United States struggle with false teachings and moral compromise? That was the warning to Pergamum. Are you known personally for good works? But have you lost your initial passion? So you might still be doing the things. I'm showing up on Sunday. I'm going, I'm doing these things, but my heart is cool. I'm not as on fire for the Lord as I once was. Do you have a reputation of being alive but spiritually dead? And again, that lukewarm, the Laodicea, you're neither hot nor cold in your faith. About community engagement. Are you engaged in the local community? That was the compliment that was given to Philadelphia. That's, if you want to be rated as a Philadelphia church, you have to be engaged in your local community. Do they prioritize outreach and evangelism, or is it more inward focused? Let's take care of our little troop, and if people happen to stumble across and find us, great. Then there's moral and ethical issues. Do you have issues with idolatry? And again, we don't worry about the stone bird with the man's body and a bird head, but are there other things that we put ahead of God in our life? And it could even be things that seem virtuous, like your family, your children, your grandchildren. I put them first. Well, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to make sure that they know that you put God first, and that there could be instances where you're actually willing to separate. Christ is known for coming to, put father against son and mother against daughter. These are the things that you have to stand up for as a means of showing the moral uh, standard. Do you respond to criticism or challenges like Sardis and Laodicea? And is there a sense of urgency to address spiritual issues? Is it that you literally hurt for the lost? You are longing to find ways to make sure that everybody hears the good news. And then are you clear on what your primary mission is? This is the criticism of Ephesus and the compliment of Philadelphia. And finally, does your mission align with biblical teaching? So these are the ways to take the lessons from the first 7 church letters in Revelation and apply it to your life, apply it to you where you worship, and then apply it to the greater issues of how you are engaging with the world at large. That's the end for tonight's overview. I'll stop the recording. I'll let you know next week. Like I said, we may combine chapters 4 and 5. All right, I gotta hit stop recording somewhere. Where is that? Here.